Hello and welcome to Emma's ESL English. Today I will be reading you a little excerpt out of one of my favorite books, and then we're going to talk about some of the vocabulary that appears in this little excerpt. It is a tiny little excerpt, but I'm super excited to read it for you. I am actually frankly astounded that it has taken me up to episode 21 to introduce you guys to Terry Pratchett. Some of you will not be surprised to hear his name. If you have had any lessons with me at all, chances are you've heard his name at least once. Terry Pratchett is absolutely my favorite British author. He was a fantasy author who unfortunately passed away in 2015 from Alzheimer's. He has sold over 85 million books worldwide, and they have been printed in over 37 languages. So it's very likely that you can find some Terry Pratchett books in your own language in your own country. But hopefully one day you'll try reading them in English. The most famous of Terry's books are about his Discworld, which is a fantasy world that he created. And he wrote 41 books specifically in or around Discworld. He also, during his lifetime, wrote and collaborated on many other books. And most famously, he collaborated with Neil Gaiman on Good Omens, which was recently made into a TV show. His writing tends to be satirical, which is a kind of comedy that criticizes people, structures, or ideas. When you look at the Discworld, if you've ever been to London, for example, then you'll recognize the big city that he has in his book. But he likes to look at things that exist in real life and consider what could we do differently or what could we do better about this. And his books tend to be really very funny. I will read an excerpt today from almost the end of Thief of Time, which is Terry's 26th Discworld book. And then we'll look at some of the vocabulary. In fact, I don't think you need to know very much about what's happening at this point in this story. Although maybe I can tell you that this particular story is about... Oh my God, this whole week we're talking about time and I just figured it out. I did not purposefully choose a Thief of Time to talk about this week, despite the fact that we're talking about time in every episode this week. I literally just finished this book this morning and I read this and I thought, hey, there's some cool vocabulary in there. I should share that. Now it's dawning on me as I tell you this, that each of our episodes this week is about time. So it's very on point for this week's classes. The whole book's about time, and it talks a little bit about how we think about time and how untrustworthy humanity's concept of time is. Dun dun dun, that sounds really dramatic. It's actually just a really fun read. The character we'll be reading about just in this second is called Susan, who for interest's sake is the granddaughter of Death. But that's a whole other story, literally. Okay. Maybe, she thought, that was a normal family state. When push came to shove, they'd rely on each other automatically, without a thought. Apart from that, they kept out of one another's way. She hadn't seen the death of rats lately. It was too much to hope that he was dead. In any case, it hadn't slowed him down so far. That made her think wistfully about the contents of her desk. Susan was very strict about eating in class and took the view that if there were rules, then they applied to everyone, even her. Otherwise, they were merely tyranny. But maybe rules were there to make you think before you broke them. There was still half a box of Higgs and Meakin's cheapest assortment tucked in there amongst the books and papers. Opening the lid carefully and slipping her hand in was easy, and so was the maintenance of a suitably teachery face while doing so. Questing fingers found a chocolate in the nest of empty paper cups, and told her that it was a damn nugget. But she was resolute. Life was tough. Sometimes you got nugget. Then she briskly picked up the keys and walked to the stationery cupboard. with what she hoped was the purposeful step of someone about to check on the supply of pencils. After all, you never knew with pencils they needed watching. The door clicked behind her, leaving only the dim light through the transom. She put the chocolate in her mouth and shut her eyes. The end. Not the end. There's a little bit that happens after that, but you'll have to go read a book to find out. So, we're going to go in order of what happened in the story. The first one is when push came to shove. Okay, when push came to shove is a very common idiom in English, and it means in general when you must commit yourself to an action or decision. So in this case, she's talking about her relationship with her grandfather specifically in this case. And really what she feels is that she has no choice. She has to rely on her grandfather just as he has to rely on her whether she likes it or not. We have another idiom very similar to this that we use in a very similar way and could quite easily have been replaced here, and that is at the end of the day. We quite often use at the end of the day to start a sentence that's going to mean finally you must do something. So in this case, she could have said at the end of the day, they'd rely on each other automatically without a thought. So there you go, 2 idioms. Next one, wistfully. So when we do something wistfully, it means that we have a vague, regretful feeling or longing. So vague is something that's not clear, not specific. And longing is when we really want something. So in this case, she thought wistfully about the contents of her desk. We know now that the contents of her desk is chocolate. So she's kind of feeling like longing. I really want that chocolate. I really could do with some more chocolate, which is how I feel most days. The next one, tyranny. Tyranny is a word that we hear more and more commonly these days, and you will hear it quite regularly in Terry Pratchett's books because the kind of government that he has chosen for the main city in his story is effectively a tyranny, but it's one that works awfully well. But usually, tyranny means cruel and oppressive government or rule. And we also have amongst. There was still a box of Higgs and Meakin's cheapest assortment tugged in there amongst the books and papers. So Higgs and Meakin's is the name of the most famous and best chocolatiers on Discworld, so we're told earlier in the novel. And then we have amongst the books and papers. So actually this week, a student and I were talking about among and amongst. And the reality is among and amongst are exactly the same word. They're not even really used more or less commonly or specific to different parts of the world. They really are pretty interchangeable, and it really is a pretty much personal choice whether you put the ST on the end or you don't. So don't panic too much. They're exactly the same thing, the same meaning, the same use in grammar, all exactly the same. And among or amongst means somebody or something is in a group or a crowd, in a mass of people or things, which we do not see separately. So whereas if we're using between, we know we have one thing at either side of us. In this case, we just know there's a lot of stuff, or we know there's a lot of people. We're not looking and counting at the individuals. In this case, we know that in her desk, there's a lot of books and papers. There's a lot of stuff in there. And in the middle of there somewhere is this box of chocolates. She goes on to say, the maintenance of a suitably teachery face while she did so. This is teacher, Teacher, with a Y on the end. It's actually really common in English to stick a Y on the end of a noun like this to give us the idea of this kind of thing, something like this. So most of us have an idea of what a teacher's face looks like. You know, they're not laughing and grinning, they're not looking embarrassed, they're not hopefully angry and shouty. They look serious and important. And so we could say that that is a teachery face. Questing. Questing fingers found a chocolate in the nest of empty paper cups. A quest is a long journey or search. It's pretty common. If we think of Luke Skywalker, he goes on a quest to find his father in Star Wars. So the idea of a quest is quite common in the storytelling world. But in this case, we're using it to talk about her fingers. So she's looking and looking and looking. We've all done it. You know what I mean. When there's a box of chocolates and it's full of empty papers and you're looking to try and find the one chocolate that's left in the box. That's what she's doing. And it says here, the nest of empty paper cups. So nest, we've got that idea of lots of things piled closely together. Nest obviously usually is for a bird nest, but in this case, lots of things piled together. And we use a nest of quite often to give us that idea of lots of things piled together, and it could be good, it could be bad. In this case, empty paper cups is kind of annoying. Another common use of nest of is a nest of vipers. Vipers are a kind of snake. So a nest of vipers is often used to describe a group of bad or sinful people. Some of you might have been wondering what a damn nugget was. Nugget is a very common chocolate in the UK. It's not actually a chocolate. It's chocolate on the outside. The inside is chewy, usually white, sweet. The internet tells me it's made of eggs and sugar. But it's quite hard and very chewy and not my favorite. In fact, I don't think it's anybody's favorite. As Terry has agreed, it's also not his favorite. It's not Susan's favorite either. Some people go and buy whole bars of straight up nugget and they thoroughly enjoy it, but I would feel very much like Susan if I had the nugget. In fact, I don't think I'd even eat the nugget. I think I'd throw it out. I'm not a fan of the nugget. And when she gets the nugget, she is resolute, which means she's purposeful, determined, and unwavering. She is going to eat that nugget. She is going to have her chocolate, whether or not it's going to be good. It doesn't matter. She is going to eat her chocolate. She then briskly picks up the keys and walks to the stationery cupboard. So briskly is quick and energetic. We usually talk about briskly walking somewhere. In this case, we briskly picked up the keys is giving us that idea that she's being businesslike about this. You know, we've already said she's got a teachery face and she's resolute about what she's doing. So this is all backing up that same idea of basically looking like she's really stern and important good teacher to hide the fact that she's sneaking off to the stationery cupboard to eat her chocolate. Okay, and the last part, leaving only the dim light through the transom. This is the first time I'd ever seen the word transom, which isn't true because I've read this book at least 5 times, but I never actually stopped and thought about what does it mean. So a learning experience for me too. Transom is the strengthening crossbar set above a window or door. When you look at a door, the door is open, the top bar that holds up the roof, basically holds up the ceiling or the wall above the door, that is called a transom. When she is looking and it leaves only the dim light through the transom, it means that gap between the top of the door and the door itself, there's some light coming through there. Who knew? Transom. New word for Emma. Cool. I'm bound to cover Terry again. Sadly, I think for you guys, if you don't like Terry Pratchett, there's no escape. He is, without doubt, my favorite writer. And when I say I've read this book 5 times, I'm not kidding. It may well be 10 times. I've read all of his books far more than once. He is an excellent writer. He's very funny. He thought very seriously about the world and how it could be a better place than it is. And for me, that's one of the things that makes me go back to it again and again and again. He's very sensible. And the other thing I really love about his writing is he was an extremely well-read person himself. So he has references to all kinds of things throughout his books. For example, he has one book called Soul Music, and throughout that book is references to rock and roll. All kinds of different famous rock and roll artists, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, It's really cool. Another book of his, Moving Pictures, is full of references to Hollywood and famous actors and actresses and movies. He has a lot of jokes, ongoing jokes, dad jokes, and he plays a lot with language in English. That's why I suggest you read it in English at some point or listen to it. There's a new publication of his books going onto Audacity. So if you like to listen to audiobooks, you could listen to them there. There's some excellent actors who are reading his books. Not that this is a sales pitch for my favorite author at all. I better stop there. I'll go all day. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be talking about time all this week. I look forward to hearing any questions or comments that you have about that. You can email me at emmaseslenglish@gmail.com, or you can head over to the website emmaseslenglish.com, where you can find blogs about today's vocabulary. You can find all the words on there. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.